NC upon a time, in a kingdom nestled between golden mountains and a glittering silver sea, there lived a small but extraordinary dragon named Ember. Unlike the other dragons who breathed great orange flames and had scales as hard as stone, Ember was different. His scales shimmered like amethyst in sunlight, and instead of fire, he breathed warm, glowing purple light, soft and gentle, like a nightlight in a child's room. The other dragons laughed at him sometimes, calling him the glowworm dragon. But Ember never let their teasing dim his spirit. Ember lived alone in a cozy cave high up on Moonwatch Mountain, the tallest peak in the kingdom. From his cave, he could see the entire land below, the twinkling rooftops of Lumino's village, the purple forests of whispering pines, the long silver ribbon of the great river that wound its way to the sea, and most beautifully of all, the moon. Every single night, Ember would sit at the edge of his cave, look up at the moon, and smile. The moon was his very best friend, even though they had never spoken. She smiled down at him too, casting a soft silver path all the way up to his home. "Good evening, dear moon," Ember would say every night, before curling his tail around himself and drifting off to sleep. But one terrible Tuesday evening, something dreadful happened. Ember woke up from an afternoon nap to find the sky outside his cave looking very, very wrong. Instead of the beautiful deep blue of evening, the sky had turned an ugly, bruised purple, and not a lovely purple like Ember's scales, but a sick, churning purple like a pot of old jam. And where the moon should have been rising, there was only darkness. A horrible, thick, swirling darkness that crept across the sky like ink spilling across white paper. Ember rushed to the edge of his cave and squinted his golden eyes. He could see something dreadful, a giant, shadowy creature made entirely of darkness and cold wind, wrapping itself around the moon like a fist made of smoke. The creature was enormous, its body constantly shifting and swirling, with two red eyes burning like dying embers deep within its shadowy form. It was the Shadow Serpent, a creature of legend so ancient that even the oldest dragons in the kingdom whispered about it only in trembling voices. The Shadow Serpent, Ember breathed, his small body trembling. It has come to swallow the moon. Below in Lumino's village, the people were already panicking. Without the moon's light, the kingdom fell into a terrifying darkness. Children began to cry. Farmers couldn't find their way home from the fields. The fish in the great river stopped swimming, because fish follow the moonlight to find their way. Fireflies, confused without the moon to guide them, swarmed in frightened circles. Even the stars seemed dimmer, as if they too were afraid of the Shadow Serpent. Ember watched the chaos below and felt something warm and fierce rise up inside him, not his purple glow, but something deeper. Something that felt like courage finding its feet for the very first time. "I have to do something," he whispered. "I have to save her." And with that, the small amethyst dragon spread his wings, wings that were a little too big for his body and still a little wobbly at the edges, and leaped into the dark, frightened sky. Lying upward through the darkness was the scariest thing Ember had ever done. Without the moon's light, the sky felt like a great empty ocean, and Ember felt very, very small. The wind pushed at him from all sides, cold and sharp as needles, trying to turn him around and send him home. But Ember tucked his chin down, pumped his wings harder, and kept going up, up, up. He had been flying for what felt like a very long time when he nearly crashed, headfirst, into something enormous and white and fluffy. He bounced off it with a soft pomp and tumbled backward, spinning in the air before catching himself with his wings. "Watch where you're going, little spark," said a very deep, very slow, very rumbling voice. Ember looked up, and up some more. What he had crashed into was not a regular cloud. It was enormous, as big as 20 houses stacked on top of each other, and it had the shape of a whale. A cloud whale, to be precise, with great barnacled sides made of dark thundercloud and a belly that glowed faintly like it had swallowed a lightning bolt for dinner. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," Ember said, doing a little apologetic bow in midair. "I'm Ember. I'm going to save the moon." The cloud whale blinked one enormous eye, an eye the size of a pond, and peered at the tiny purple dragon hovering in front of it. Then it made a sound like distant thunder, which was actually a laugh. "Save the moon," the cloud whale rumbled. "You? A dragon no bigger than a walnut." "I'm not that small," Ember said, drawing himself up as tall as he could, which admittedly was not very tall at all. "And yes, someone has to. The Shadow Serpent has wrapped itself around her and the whole kingdom is in darkness. So I'm going." The cloud whale was quiet for a very long time, watching Ember with its enormous eye. Then, slowly, it smiled, a smile so wide you could have parked 3 boats inside it. "I like you, little spark," it said. "You have more courage than dragons 10 times your size. I cannot fly you all the way. These old bones don't go that high anymore. But I can show you the bridge of stars." The cloud whale breathed out, and as it exhaled, a path made of glowing golden stars appeared in the sky, stretching upward like a winding staircase toward where the moon should have been. Each star was just large enough to land on and rest. The path glittered and swayed gently in the night wind. The bridge of stars, a secret road that only appears for those brave enough to need it. "Follow the bridge," said the cloud whale, already beginning to drift away into the darkness. "And Ember, the moon believes in you. She always has. She told me so, the last time we spoke." Ember felt a rush of warmth in his chest so strong it nearly made him cry. He pressed one small claw to his heart and nodded. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he turned to the bridge of stars, took a deep breath, and began to run along it, bounding from star to star, higher and higher into the sky. After what felt like 1,000 jumps across the bridge of stars, Ember finally arrived at the very top of the sky, a place so high up that the air was thin and cold, and the stars around him were as big as flowers. And there, coiled around the moon like an enormous sleeping snake, was the shadow serpent. Up close, it was even more terrifying than it had appeared from below. Its body was made of living darkness that constantly shifted and swirled, cold as midwinter and deep as the bottom of the sea. Its 2 red eyes found Ember immediately, burning with an ancient, terrible hunger. The moon herself was wrapped completely in the shadow serpent's coils. But in one small gap between the dark coils, Ember could see her, a soft, golden silver glow, dimmer than usual, but still shining. Still there. Still fighting. "Moon!" Ember called out. "I'm here. I've come to help." A small sound came from within the coils, a sound like silver bells very far away, and Ember knew she had heard him. "A dragon," said the shadow serpent, in a voice that sounded like wind howling through an empty castle. It was not a frightening voice, exactly. It was a cold, hollow voice, a voice that had forgotten what warmth felt like. A tiny, ridiculous, glowing purple dragon. "Come to fight me." "I haven't come to fight you," Ember said, though his legs were trembling quite violently. That surprised the shadow serpent. Its red eyes narrowed. "Then why have you come, little spark?" "I've come to ask you to let her go," said Ember. "The moon hasn't done anything wrong. The people of my kingdom need her. The fish need her. The fireflies need her. The children who are afraid of the dark need her most of all. Whatever it is you want, maybe there's another way." For a long moment, the shadow serpent stared at him. Then it laughed, a sound like 1,000 windows breaking at once. "What I want," it hissed. "I want warmth, little dragon. I want light. I have lived in the coldest darkness between the stars for 10,000 years. I am made of shadow. And I am so cold." Ember blinked. He had expected the shadow serpent to roar that it wanted power, or to say it wanted to plunge the world into eternal night because it was evil. He had not expected it to say it was cold. He had not expected it to sound, underneath all its terrible swirling darkness, almost lonely. Sometimes the most frightening monsters are simply the loneliest. Ember took a careful step forward. The shadow serpent watched him, its red eyes following his every move. Ember took a breath, and then he did the bravest thing he had ever done in his life, braver even than flying into the dark sky, braver even than climbing the bridge of stars. He opened his... The creature flinched, as if it had been burned. Then, very slowly, it stilled. The swirling stopped, just in one small patch, where Ember's light had touched it. And in that patch, the darkness went from cold and churning to something almost peaceful. "That is, warm," the shadow serpent said, in a voice that was barely a whisper now. Ember kept his purple glow streaming forward, gentle and steady, like a warm candle in a cold room. And something extraordinary happened. The shadow serpent, for the very first time in 10,000 years, began to slowly, very slowly, uncoil. Not completely, not yet, but just enough. Just enough for the moon's silver light to seep out through the gap, washing over Ember's purple scales and turning them the most beautiful silver-violet color imaginable. "More," the shadow serpent said softly. Not as a command, but almost as a question. Almost as a please. "I'll make you a deal," Ember said carefully. "I will give you warmth. But you have to give the moon her freedom. You can't hold on to something beautiful just because you're lonely. It doesn't work that way. The more tightly you squeeze, the more the light goes out. The shadow serpent was quiet for a long time. It watched the purple glow that Ember was breathing, and even as they spoke, Ember noticed that the creature's edges were softening, not disappearing, but becoming less sharp, less jagged, less like a thing made of pain. You would do that, the shadow serpent said. Give warmth to a creature like me? When all the other dragons fled. When every living thing runs from my shadow. Everyone deserves kindness, said Ember firmly. Even shadow serpents. Especially ones who are cold and lonely and have been forgotten for 10,000 years. The moon's glow pulsed then, brighter for just a moment, as if she was nodding. As if she were saying, yes. Yes, exactly. The shadow serpent let out a very long, very slow breath, a breath that smelled of cold starlight and ancient wind, and then it began to uncoil properly. Coil by coil, the darkness peeled away from the moon, retreating, releasing, letting go. And as it did, Ember continued to pour his purple warmth at the creature, surrounding it in a gentle glow that asked nothing in return, that made no demands, that simply said, you are seen. You are not forgotten. The greatest courage is not the courage to fight, but the courage to be kind to something frightening. When the last coil released, the moon blazed back to life with a brilliance that made the entire sky ring like a bell. Her light cascaded down in great silver rivers, flooding the world below with warmth and silver beauty. From far, far below, Ember could hear the most wonderful sound in the world, children cheering, people laughing. Even, he was certain, he could hear the distant splash of fish leaping back into the river in joy. The shadow serpent hovered before him now, fully uncoiled, and it looked different. Still dark. Still made of shadow. But softer, somehow. More like a dark sky before a sunrise than like a cold, hollow thing of hunger. Its red eyes had changed too. Instead of burning, they now glowed more like the soft red of dying coals, which is to say, a warmth that was only just beginning. What happens to me now? The shadow serpent asked. Now, said Ember, we figure out where you belong. If the shadow serpent finally free of its terrible hunger, a hush fell over the high sky. The stars shone brighter than they had in years. The wind became calm and soft. And then, something happened that had never happened to Ember before, something he had dreamed about on 1,000 nights from his cave on Moonwatch Mountain. The moon spoke to him. Her voice was not like a human voice, and it was not like any dragon voice Ember had ever heard. It was more like a sound than a voice, a clear, silver sound, like a spoon tapping a crystal glass, or like the very first note of the most beautiful song ever written. But somehow, impossibly, Ember understood every word perfectly. Dear Ember, said the moon, do you know that I have watched you every single night for your entire life? From the very first night you hatched from your egg and peeked out of that little cave to look at me with your big golden eyes, I have been watching over you. Ember felt his throat tighten with something wonderful and overwhelming. He tried to speak but could only manage a small, wordless sound. You never fought the darkness with more darkness, the moon continued. You never tried to beat the cold with cold. You used warmth. You used kindness. You used the gift you were always told was too small to matter. But Ember, that gift, that gentle glowing light of yours, it was always the most powerful thing in the sky. The thing you think makes you different is often the very thing the world needs most. What about him? Ember said, glancing at the shadow serpent, who was hovering quietly at the edge of the moonlight, looking uncertain, looking like a creature that had never been allowed to simply exist in peace before. The moon turned her gentle light toward the shadow serpent, and the creature shrank back slightly, but did not flee. Because the moon's gaze was not frightened, and it was not angry. It was the gaze of someone who understood a very long loneliness. Shadow serpent, said the moon, I know you are cold. I know you have been forgotten. You have searched for warmth in the wrong places, in the wrong ways. But I have a task for you, if you will take it. A task, the shadow serpent whispered. The world needs both light and shadow, said the moon gently. Without shadow, there are no stories told around campfires. Without shadow, there are no comfortable cool spots on a summer's afternoon. Without shadow, light itself means nothing, for how can you appreciate brightness without knowing darkness? The world does not need to be rid of you. It needs you to find your proper place. For the first time in 10,000 years, the shadow serpent was truly, completely still. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happened. The jagged, hungry edges of its shadow body smoothed out, and instead of looking like a thing made of pain, it began to look more like the beautiful long shadow of a mountain at sunrise, deep and cool and full of quiet mystery. "And what is my proper place?" it asked. The moon smiled, and her smile lit up the entire sky. "Wherever there is a child afraid of the dark," she said, "you will be the shadow that the brave nightlight pushes back. Wherever there is a story to be told, you will be the darkness that makes the firelight seem warmer. You will always be part of the night. But you will never be lonely again, because the night and I, we are always, always here." Hen Ember finally glided back down through the sky and landed at the entrance of his cozy cave on Moonwatch Mountain. The entire kingdom of Luminos was blazing with celebration. Every window was lit. Every street was full of laughing, dancing people, their faces turned upward toward the moon's beautiful light. From his cave, Ember could see it all: the silver river flashing with jumping fish, the fireflies weaving golden patterns through the purple forests, the children of Luminos running in joyful circles with their arms spread wide, as if trying to hug the moonlight itself. Ember sat down at the edge of his cave, exactly as he did every night, and looked up at the moon. She was brighter than he had ever seen her, a full, perfect circle of silver gold light, hanging in a sky thick with stars. And as he watched, she seemed to shine just a little bit brighter, a light that was meant specifically for him, a light that found its way through all the other stars and all the other dark spaces and landed, warm and silver, right on the little purple dragon sitting on his mountain. "Good evening, dear moon," Ember said, as he always did. But tonight the words meant something entirely different than they ever had before. And the moon, for the very first time, answered back, not in words, but in the way only the moon can answer, by shining her very brightest, by lighting the whole world until the shadows were gentle and friendly, by making the night feel not like something to fear but like the warmest, most beautiful room in the whole universe. As for the shadow serpent, well, the kingdom of Luminos still knew him, in a way. On nights when the clouds swept in and the moonlight made dramatic, sweeping shadows across the hills, the children would say, "The shadow serpent is dancing tonight." And it was no longer said with fear. It was said with the kind of fondness you feel for something that is part of your world, part of your nights, part of the great mysterious beauty of everything. Every shadow is just light that has taken a longer way around. The other dragons, of course, heard about what Ember had done. Word travels fast on dragon wind currents, and by the very next morning, every dragon in every mountain and every cave and every sky nest in the kingdom knew the full story. The dragons who had laughed at Ember, who had called him the glowworm dragon, who had teased him for his gentle purple light, they became very quiet indeed. And later, some of them flew to Moonwatch Mountain one by one, not to apologize exactly. Dragons are not brilliant at apologies, but to sit beside Ember and look up at the moon together, which is perhaps the best kind of apology there is. And Ember, being Ember, made room for all of them. He became the most famous dragon in the kingdom, not because he was the largest, or the strongest, or because he breathed the hottest fire. He became famous because he was the dragon who understood that the greatest power does not come from your claws or your wings or your flame. It comes from the warmth inside you. The light you give not because someone asks you to, but because it is simply who you are. Every child in Luminos knew his story. Parents told it at bedtime, when the moonlight came softly through the curtains and the shadows in the corners were just shadows, just friendly, familiar shapes that meant the night had come and it was time to rest. They would say, "Look at the moon, little one. She is watching over you." And somewhere up on Moonwatch Mountain, the little purple dragon is watching over her. And everything is exactly as it should be. And the children would look out at the moon, and feel safe, and close their eyes, and dream the most beautiful dreams, of flying through star bridges, of cloud whales with lightning bolt bellies, of shadow serpents turned gentle, of a small brave dragon with amethyst scales and golden eyes, glowing with the most extraordinary light the sky had ever seen.